So the session that we have going on today is how to leverage technology to build resilient business communities. So just to introduce myself, I'm Ali Carden. I'm from GHD Digital. I've been working with local governments here in Canada for my entire career, which sadly is about 20 years now. And I've spent a lot of time working with municipalities, economic development, tourism, and really working in the technology consulting sector. So we've got a short agenda today. The session's pretty quick. I'm going to cover three main points as we go through the presentation. So really just looking at our current economic landscape and some priorities in Ontario, building resilient economies, and how do we leverage technology for resilience. So before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that there's a lot going on. We've got a very dynamic situation here in Canada and Ontario. So I do want to acknowledge that. I'm not here to talk about Trump or tariffs or our relationship with the US, but I do want to acknowledge that it's dynamic. I've been working on the research in this presentation for the past couple of weeks and had to change it many times as the things are changing daily, hourly sometimes. And it's been really interesting, but what's really come out of what's happened in the last little while is that resiliency is so important, right? And I think we all are looking now at how do we be more resilient? And I'm here to talk about how technology can help with resiliency. So the first thing before we jump in, I always like to kind of level set on where are we at in Ontario, looking at our stats, our kind of community profile. So a little update on where we're at today in Ontario. So we have 16 million people. Of that, 8 million of those are working individuals. We have a $1.1 trillion GDP, which is about 40% of Canada's total GDP. And as of January 10th, our unemployment rate is 7.5%, which is up about 6% over December. So definitely not trending in the right direction. So the key sectors here in Ontario are real estate, manufacturing, financial services, health and education, and with these four sectors, makes up about 77% of our economy. So in terms of the Ontario technology sector, the tech sector is really a driving force behind our economic growth, and it's filled in a lot of gaps for Ontario over the last 20 years as different sectors are growing. The technology sector has really filled in some of those gaps that we've had. Ontario has half of Canada's IT workforce are here in Ontario. There's 25,000 tech firms, and we generate about $48 billion in GDP in Ontario through tech firms alone. We're also a known leader in AI and cyber, and we have one of the largest tech centers in North America. So in terms of Ontario's talent and innovation, we have 65,000 STEM graduates annually here in Ontario. We have three of the top 100 universities in the world. 70% of our adults have a post-secondary degree. We have two of the largest tech ecosystems in the world, and we have 23 research hospitals. It's pretty impressive, actually, when you think about Ontario. So in terms of Ontario's economic priorities, this is where things get really dynamic, right? What was a priority this morning? What was a priority yesterday, last week, January, November? These things are changing very, very quickly, and will continue to change as our relationship changes with the US and what's going on there. So again, what's priority today is not going to be a priority tomorrow. So they're going to change. I will say across every platform, media, social, everything that I'm seeing and hearing right now, we're trending buy local, support local, grow local, invest local, visit local, and boycott the US. That's effectively what's trending. And it's not my opinion, it's just what it is. So, in addition to what's happening, I think the Ontario's priorities are typically focused on developing and scaling small businesses, job growth, innovation, trade and investment opportunities, and how to remain competitive, a competitive place to do business here in Ontario. So again, a lot going on. Priorities are going to shift. So just to touch a little bit on some of the challenges. So again, common challenges that we face every day are labor shortages, skill gaps, housing affordability, infrastructure, mostly to support the growth, digital transformation, and also how that disrupts our workforces as well, climate change, sustainability, and our global trade and tariff uncertainty. So again, there's a lot changing, and with our neighbors, I think one thing that's quite clear is we need to be on our toes. These things are changing all the time. Trump, not only has the tariff had an impact, but also some of these presidential orders, executive orders that are being issued to cancel the Paris climate change agreement. There's also been a lot of impacts around the investments and support for electric vehicles. Canada has built or is building and investing billions of dollars in electric battery plants, yet now the US may not be that partner that wants to buy those. So we've effectively invested billions of dollars to build products that potentially our biggest buyer doesn't want anymore, right? This is going to have big impacts, but the moral here is that our US partner changes often, right? Like Trump will have us on our toes. And again, that concept of resiliency is so important. And I think it's driving everyone to think of how do we build by local? How do we protect ourselves and insulate ourselves from these sorts of changes that can really impact us? So as I go forward, I think when we talk about building a resilient business community, resiliency today is really around that being self-sufficient. Again, that concept of how do we build local? Where are the gaps? Like what do we need to produce? Where do we need to produce? How do we support the local growth so we've got that self-sufficiency? Diversification, obviously a big piece of that. Ontario's fairly diversified, but we export, 80% of our exports go to the US. That has a big impact if those change, and I see that we're already looking at other export countries that we can, shift to instead. But ultimately, I think the other piece of this is around our social networks and ensuring that we kind of work together as communities. We're aligning the communities, the people, the businesses, along with government to help make decisions and figure out how do we solve some of these problems, how do we support the local business growth, and help them scale their businesses as well. So in terms of some of the strategies for resiliency, touch on a few of these, but economic diversification with that focus on our local supporting local businesses. Looking at skill development, talent attraction. So this is also how can we help our workforces, develop the skills that they need for the future, right? Digital transformation to improve our service delivery, establishing incubators, accelerators, and support for startups. And we don't have to do all of this ourselves. We can look at partnerships with businesses, communities, even education centers, and figure out how can we have those partnerships to help us build some of these. And I think lastly, just ensuring that we have policies that support marginalized and unrepresented groups in our communities too. So getting into the technology piece. So how can we use technology to help us be more resilient? So some of the questions that I would ask myself is, how can we do more with less? Where are there operational efficiencies within our municipalities and where we work? How can you increase your attraction to investors and businesses and talent? How do you promote yourself for tourism? In terms of increasing tourism, how can you use technology to help grow the tourism in the cities and municipalities that you live in? I think it's very important to make it easy to do business with you, right? So having your services and things available online, data available online, site selectors, investors want your information, what's available to them, and keeping those things online for that self-serve sort of access. And how can you provide benefits to your local businesses? So these are just some things of questions you might think about how you can use technology today. So some of the areas where technology will have the greatest benefit, and I'll get into these in a little bit more in a moment, but GIS or open data, so I talked about that, like how do you get the data that site selectors need online and available, right? We don't want to have people calling or looking through PDFs and those kind of things. How do we get real-time access to updated data online? Looking at digital platforms for businesses and public engagement, the days of not having things online and services online it's no longer we just can't operate that way anymore. Unfortunately, Amazon has shifted everyone's mindset to what we call the Amazon effect. Everyone wants to do everything online. They want it instant, delivered in an hour, right? So these lack of online services that a lot of cities have, where you have to pick up the phone or scan a document and mail it in or go into the city hall, that's not going to attract businesses, especially ones that are focused on innovation and startup and growing within the community. That just isn't going to work right for them. They don't want to invest in places that aren't thinking of service delivery and innovation. Seeing a really big uptick in the number of municipalities investing in CRMs today. So seeing Salesforce at a municipality is becoming more common. Before, 5 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. Economic development is really the areas of where I'm seeing the investment in CRMs, and that's for the work that you're doing in any sort of digital marketing, working with investors, grants, those sorts of things, but really building up the businesses and the profile of the communities that you have. So certainly a thing we're seeing. A lot of investment going into AI and data and analytics. So the biggest challenge I see in municipalities today is you can't use AI if you don't have data and if you don't have the right data, right? So really just starting with what data do we have and is that data accurate, right? AI can kind of make things up, but it's the garbage in, garbage out sort of concept. So making sure if you want to be using these tools, you got to make sure that the data that you have is somewhat usable. But certainly seeing a lot of trends in using AI in economic development for analyzing profile, tourist data, economic data, and such. eGov services, I mentioned this already. This is that Amazon experience. Businesses and communities want things online, and it really sets the tone when investors and even tourists are looking at your city. They want to see that innovative cities that are focused on service delivery. So I'll talk a little bit more on some of these on the next slide. So the GIS open data, so that's really getting your information available. It doesn't have to be robust platforms. This is really just open data that has things like your available properties, could be economic profile data, demographic data, zoning information, but getting real-time information available. A lot of people like to kind of self-serve today. They don't want to have to pick up a phone, come into an office to get information. They want to look at that themselves. The digital platforms and public engagement. So from the digital platform perspective, this is really around your community and business services. So making sure that you've got business portals available for the local businesses, that you've got the ability to help them grow and scale their business, and making sure that the processes that they have to do within the municipality are easy to do. CRM I've touched on quite a bit. I don't think I don't think there's much more I'll add to that, other than potentially just exploring what those opportunities are within your municipality to track the sort of data that you're collecting about whether it's I don't want to say lead generation, but when you're working with investors and businesses, those sorts of things. The AI and data analytics. So again, we're seeing the trend more in larger cities using these tools, and it's mostly around analytical statistics, helping with profiling, those sorts of things. So again, it all comes back to the data that we're putting in the system, but ultimately those AI tools are being used in economic development to help with future insights. So eGov services, again, getting into that online permitting, licensing, grant systems. We just want those things to be streamlined and online and easy to use. And that kind of ties into the Smart City initiative. But again, this is more tied to leveraging technology within the city to have that more innovative feel to your city. So, when you're looking at infrastructure, transportation, monitoring the health of the city. Can tell you quickly, when I travel quite a bit for work, and Australia is a country that every single thing they have in their city is monitored, even from like how much shade is provided from the trees, because that provides energy efficiency, right? Like literally everything is monitored, and they have like mandates where all of that information has to be publicly posted real time on their website. And it's really unique because those cities and communities are really focused on having a healthy city, and they make that information available. So I did want to touch a bit on tech and tourism, just because, just like buy local, support local, I'm seeing just even today, sitting in the coffee shop, watching the news, it's like travel local, right? How do we stay in Canada, spend money in Canada? And, so this is another big area. And I think, first of all, no one's going to come visit you if they can't find you. So if you can't find a way to produce content online where you can be found, then no one's going to come, right? You have to be able to showcase the uniqueness of your city, whatever that flavor is, and how you promote your city. You have to be able to find it. And that's purely done through your web experience and search engine optimization. Secondly, I think a lot of municipalities that I see really underinvest in digital marketing, social, and ads. But again, in the private sector, this is how people find you, right? This is how I know about events that are happening, about things that would attract me to the city. So I think having that focus and making those investments are really important. In terms of using AI tools, one really good use case is actually for multilingual support. A lot of the tools on the market today can take an English-only web or experience that you may have and allow someone to come and ask questions and interact with you in completely different languages, and can do the translations really well today. So that's another area that it's a very quick, easy solution. COVID kind of sparked this AR, VR sort of experience for tourism. I do see that continuing to trend, right, is developing those immersive experiences to attract people, especially you'll see a lot of VR glasses coming out now and all these different experiences. So just making those available where possible. From an AI data perspective, again, leveraging those tools to analyze your tourism data. So understanding the preferences, tailoring recommendations, having AI assistants on your website that can actually, people can come and say, where should I eat? How do I get there? What are some of the places I can stay? What's happening tonight? Instead of them having to do all these different searches and build an itinerary and figure it all on themselves, think of a ChatGPT experience on your website that I can just have a conversation with. I'm coming next week. Where should I stay? How should I get there? Those sorts of things can just make that experience so much better. And lastly, I think from a tourism perspective is using geolocation data to also personalize experience. So this can be when people are using a mobile app or they're visiting your website, knowing where they are. So if they're local, their tourism experience might be different than someone coming from a different city or a different country. So you can actually leverage geolocation data to provide a more personalized experience. So just wrapping up, I'm mindful because this presentation is going to start and we have to compete for sound. So I apologize if I'm talking quick, but I have anxiety about that noise starting behind me. So just in terms of, yeah, like the road ahead, it's very dynamic. And I think, you know, as I kind of reflect on being resilient, like technology is an enabler for us to be resilient. And who knows what happens with the US, but our eyes are open now to the fact that we need to be way more resilient than what we were, way less dependent, and diversify ourselves. And technology is an enabler to help us do that. It's very rare I see an investment in technology that doesn't provide a benefit or a significant benefit, but it's really just knowing a lot of this technology is taxpayer funded, so where do we get the best bang for our buck? Where can we leverage technology to really help us improve our resiliency within our communities? So I think that's it. I do want to thank you for coming, and I've got a couple minutes for questions.